Good evening. If I can get the BET members to settle down. Good evening. This is the beginning of the fiscal 17 or the 2016-2017 budget cycle. These always begin in the same way. We hear from the first selectman, Mr. Tessie, and then we hear from the superintendent of schools, Dr. McCursey. And then we have a public hearing, at which point you can speak. And Dr. McCursey is telling me that the chair of the board will also be speaking, so we'll be happy to have her. There are sign-up sheets over on the table over there for those of you who would like to speak when we get to the public hearing, which should be around 7 o'clock. And if we have a lot of comment, we will probably restrict the time to about 3 minutes each. But if we don't have too many people, then we won't be paying quite so much attention to the clock. In many cases, there's a large clock over there, so you can watch as people speak and see how that goes. So without further ado, Peter Tessie, First Selectman of the Town of Greenwich, Connecticut.
Great. Thank you very much. Good evening, Mr. Lash, Chairman of the BET Budget Committee, Mrs. Kiernan, Mrs. Tarkington, and Mr. Raymer. I'm pleased to submit the recommended budget for the fiscal year commencing on July 1, 2016 and ending June 30th, 2017. The recommended budget was formulated by town departments, the Board of Education, and the First Selectman's Office pursuant to Town Charter and the BET budget guidelines. This budget represents a commitment to maintain the character of our town and strengthens it as a premier place to live, work, and raise a family, but does so within our long-standing goals for a modest and predictable tax rate. There are handouts of tonight's presentation and message on the table as you come in. It's also available online. The presentation tonight will look at the budget in summary format. We'll look at pressures on the budget, notably fixed charges, new initiatives, which include fire staffing, Greenwich Point police coverage, summer months, and then the capital budget overview of major projects. The 15-16 recommended budget reflects a mill rate increase of 2.73%, which represents $16.81 million of increased spending. This increase is driven primarily by a 7.73% increase in fixed charges and a 7.71% increase in the capital tax levy. Town and Board of Education operating budgets are recommended to increase by 1.88% and 2.2% respectively. We've looked at a graph which shows the budget 6-year trend in terms of town services, education, fixed charges, and capital. As you can see, this year the fixed charges are total amount trending slightly above the overall town services spending. And so we again emphasize the necessity to continue to focus our time and attention on the fixed charges. So within the fixed charges, we're going to talk a little bit about each of those. In healthcare, the cost of healthcare, which is the largest component of fixed charges, continues to rise. Over the summer, the town issued a request for proposal, RFP, for its health insurance carrier. The 12-month contract award was made to Cigna. The 2016 rate reflects a 14.4% increase over 2015. Participants in the town's medical plan experience a higher than average number of catastrophic claims when compared to Cigna's book of business. This experience existed with the town's prior carrier, Anthem, and the trend has held for a number of years. Medical costs in the Northeast, particularly within the New York-Boston corridor, exceed the national average. In addition, the average age of municipal employees tends to be older than the average age in the private sector, which skews medical costs when compared to national averages. Legislation passed in Hartford in May 2015 allowing municipalities to join the state partnership plan has provided the town with an additional option. This health benefit plan is negotiated between the state and a coalition of employee organizations representing state employees. Applications by full groups, defined as an entire municipality or Board of Education, for admission to the plan are automatically accepted. Applications from partial groups, an individual bargaining unit, are reviewed by a state labor management cost containment committee and may be rejected based upon claim history. It is important to note, as recent as Friday, there are discussions in Hartford between the Office of Policy and Management and the State Controller's Office with regard to the arrangements for the state partnership plan. So we are watching it very closely. We have communication out to our state senator to keep us apprised, because it could no longer be as advantageous given potential changes to legislation to mitigate the cost. So I just alert you to that. As we said at the outset, the whole area of healthcare is going to be an ongoing conversation for us as we deliberate on this budget with you. With regard to the pension contribution, the recommended pension contribution of $19.55 million reflects a 9.5% decrease. This figure assumes a return rate of 7% and an inflation rate of 3%. These assumptions are unchanged from the current year. I believe the current assumptions are prudent at this time. However, I would encourage the BET and the Pension Board to review the assumptions for fiscal 17-18 over the summer of 2016. If changes are recommended, the impact to the required contribution can be determined well before budget planning begins for fiscal year 17-18. A change in rate of return assumptions from 7% to 6.75%, and a change in inflation rate assumptions from 3% to 2.25% would increase the contribution to $22.02 million. In the area of the risk fund, the contribution to the risk fund is doubling to $1 million. This increase is a proactive step to increase the reserves in the fund to offset potential legal settlements. For the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2015, the risk fund reduced its fund balance by almost $890,000. The recommended contribution would restore fund balance to over $2.6 million. Looking at Nathaniel Witherell, this budget includes two separate contributions to Nathaniel Witherell. I am recommending a one-time contribution of $5.3 million from fund balance in order to address the operating deficit for the past fiscal year 2014-15 and the projected deficit in fiscal year 15-16. This one-time contribution is consistent with the auditor's establishment of reserve fund balance to address operating shortfalls in the fiscal year ending 2015. CAFR, Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. It is important to note, and I emphasize this for those who are following closely, it is important to note that the one-time contribution is significantly inflating the increase in spending. Without this one-time contribution, overall town spending would have increased 2.8%, or $11.5 million, versus the recommended 4.09%, or $16.81 million. Lastly, fixed charges would have increased by 2.86%, or $3.11 million compared to the recommended amount of 7.73%, or $8.41 million. I'm also recommending a contribution of $1.2 million from the general fund to support the fiscal year 16-17 operating Nathaniel Witherell budget. This contribution represents a decrease of 50% from the current year, as the town will no longer charge Nathaniel Witherell for in-kind services. Even with this contribution, however, Nathaniel Witherell is projected to have a net operating deficit of approximately $3.25 million. This operating deficit reflects a systemic issue that needs to be addressed. I look forward to continuing to work collaboratively with the RTM, BET, and the Nathaniel Witherell Board as we work together to best address the operating deficit and support the long-term needs of Nathaniel Witherell. The school lunch fund, we recommend a contribution there of $650,000. It's increasing 44.44%. The contribution, along with the projected favorable operating position, should reduce the fund balance deficit from over $680,000 on July 1, 2015 to just over $317,000 on June 30th of 2017. And as we see, the fixed charges graph up shows the cost escalation for healthcare. It shows a flattening in the area of the pension contribution, as well as a fairly stable other fixed charges year-to-year comparison. As we look at new initiatives, it certainly comes as no surprise that we were discussing the fire services. The overall objective in this area is to equalize fire services across the town, to increase staffing levels from 2 to 3 firefighters on all engines staffed by career personnel, and 4 new firefighters per year for the next 4 years to achieve that objective. The request for 4 new line firefighters is to advance my priority of increasing the staffing level from, again, 2 to 3 firefighters on all engines staffed by career personnel. Under this proposal, 4 new firefighters would be added to Station 3, which is Byram. For those who are not familiar with the operational designations, each of our stations have a number associated with it. There are 6 town-owned stations and 2 volunteer-operated stations. Each of them have a number. We have a total of 8. The initiative has been presented in the last 2 budget cycles as a request for 8 new line firefighters in order to increase the staffing level at 2 stations. The fiscal year 16-17 request reflects a concerted effort to implement this staffing plan incrementally to reduce the impact to taxpayers while working to equalize fire service across the town. This initiative seeks to reduce the hazards associated with a 2-person staffing model and improve the operational efficiency of firefighters who provide the initial response to incidents. The next initiative is one that addresses safety out at Greenwich Point. It's Greenwich Point police coverage, and it's in order to ensure safety and security at Greenwich Point during the peak season. This budget provides for consistent police coverage on the weekends and holidays from Memorial Day through Labor Day. This initiative will allow for strong enforcement of existing town ordinances. The Police and Parks and Recreation Department reviewed their staffing schedules and were able to reduce the total cost of this increased service to only $23,300. Important to note that the Board of Selectmen did implement increases to the 2016 fees for both parking and the daily non-resident day pass, so there will be increased revenues attributable to those fee increases. The car fee is now $35, up from $25, and the day pass is up $7 from $6. Looking toward the capital budget, the proposed $72,479,000 capital plan conforms to the BET debt policy and will highlight 3 major capital projects. The first is the Northwest Fire and GEMS facility, then New Lebanon School, and then the Eastern Greenwich Civic Center. This budget includes funds to design a joint fire station, which would be station number 9, in GEMS Station 4 in Northwest Greenwich. The town administration is currently in negotiation to purchase a piece of property in Northwest Greenwich that can suitably accommodate a joint fire and GEMS facility. This initiative continues to remain a top capital priority in order to provide adequate fire protection to Northwest Greenwich and to address the need for a permanent GEMS facility in that area. Currently, Fire Station 4, Glenville, provides fire protection to Northwest Greenwich. Although the 4-person staffing model that has been in place at Station 4 since July 2012 ensures a fully staffed initial response to incidents, response times far exceed recommended thresholds. The National Fire Protection Association, NFPA, 1710 calls for a 4-person response 90% of the time. For response to locations in Northwest Greenwich, response times average between 8 and 12 minutes. GEM Station 4 will replace the existing trailer at 1327 King Street with a permanent facility to house crews and properly garage ambulances. Part of the GEM's contract that is approved and administered through the Department of Health stipulates that the town will provide facilities to GEMS. New Lebanon Elementary School. This budget includes construction funding of $29.95 million and $2.1 million for temporary classrooms to replace the existing New Lebanon school building in order to meet the needs of the growing student population in Byram. The New Lebanon Building Committee has been working diligently with project architects to finalize a design for the new building. The Board of Selectmen recently unanimously voted to refer option 3 to the Planning and Zoning Commission for municipal improvement status. The Eastern Greenwich Civic Center. This budget requests funds of $520,000 for which will advance the design of a new Eastern Greenwich Civic Center to its final stage. The existing building's internal systems are failing due to age, and there are multiple issues with the sanitary, electrical, heating, plumbing, and structural systems. It is critical to advance this project as it is difficult to keep the building functioning in its present state. Efforts to rehabilitate the Eastern Greenwich Civic Center date back to 1997, when the need for exterior restoration was identified. This effort was not funded. Since then, several efforts have been made to address the issues associated with the aging building, including the replacement of the roof in fiscal 11-12. In fiscal 14-15, a funding request for a phased replacement of the heating system was denied. Funds were appropriated in 15-16 to begin the initial design for a new building. This year's request would complete the design and produce a full construction drawings and specifications for the new structure. Construction cost estimates presented in the capital improvement plan for fiscal 18-19 will be further refined through this final design. That really concludes my presentation to you and highlighting the many areas that drive the budget. Again, to reaffirm, this budget comes to you within your guideline at 2.73%. It meets all of the thresholds established by the BET as it relates to dollar increase percentages year to year. In addition, it is in conformity to the policies established by the BET as it relates to their debt fund policy and their fund balance policy. And I think that's important to note for folks out in the audience that this budget is affirmed through adherence to those policies and remarkably accomplishes a considerable amount given some of those fixed cost liabilities that we're having to address. I do want to thank and acknowledge the assistance and cooperation from the many town departments and school officials in preparing the budget. This is my 9th budget as the town's first selectman. In each year, in each budget, we find new challenges and issues that we must address. I have tried to maintain a uniform philosophy while working on these budgets. I believe town government is here to protect public safety, provide a quality public education, and deliver public services that enhance the value of our homes and businesses. The proposals included within this budget meet that objective. And I would like to also personally thank our town administrator, Ben Brannion, our senior management analyst, Melissa Jones, for their steadfast work with me and with the town departments and members of the BET to produce the product that you have before you this evening. I think their professional acumen is shown in the quality of the product and certainly will help in the deliberations as we go forward. I also want to thank the members of the Capital Improvement Projects Committee for your support and assistance as we looked at that budget, and enjoy the benefit of your knowledge and expertise. We will look forward to being engaged with all the various members of the BET over the next several weeks, and again, I'm happy to address the questions at the requisite meetings that you see up there. Will be, for those watching at home or in the audience, that is the schedule that has been determined for review of these areas of the budget in great detail, and frankly, probably some of the most important meetings to attend if you really want to understand the thinking that goes into the judgments on how Greenwich functions and operates for the ensuing fiscal year. So again, my heartfelt thanks to all of you. Again, particularly to the office staff, Ben and Melissa, thank you so much. And thank you, Mr. Lash, for the time, and members of the committee for your time and attention.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Tessie. Peter referred in his presentation to the guidelines that were prepared by the BET in the fall, and he's quite right. It is, to be candid, unusual to have a budget at this stage of the game which conforms to all the guidelines. So I want to add my thanks to Mr. Tessie and his staff and the department heads and the CIP committee and the others who have worked over the last 3 or 4 months to get us to this point, which doesn't mean, of course, the BET won't have questions to ask at its hearings. So I'll repeat what Mr. Tessie said. We would certainly encourage those of you who are interested in the details of how the sausage is made to attend the Budget Committee meetings and later the meetings of the full BET. So now we will turn to the school's budget, and for that we have the Chairman of the Board, Laura Erickson, and her able assistant, the Superintendent of Schools, Dr. McKersey. For those of you who've arrived a few minutes ago, there are sign-up sheets over on the table over there. If you're interested in speaking to the budget during the public hearing, I would encourage you to sign up, and we will take the people who signed up first, and then if there's still some interest in speaking, we'll return to the others. So, sorry. Thank you. Good evening.
Okay. Good evening, members of the BET Budget Committee, members of the community. My name is Laura Erickson. I am the chair of the Board of Education, and on behalf of the Board of Education, I am pleased to present for your consideration the fiscal year 17 budget. We're going to briefly talk about our overview for the budget, our strategic plan, and then most importantly, our students. Our budget overview, the recommended budget for fiscal year 17 is just over $150 million, which equates to a $3.2 million increase or a 2.2% increase. Over 90% of our budget is due primarily to contractual salary obligations. You'll see this in our major object codes 100 account. 2.4% increases on the personnel services. So coming in at 2.2 is a little bit of took a lot of work. Our projected enrollment for the fiscal year 17 is increased slightly by 81 students. Importantly, we have minimized our staffing increases. The net is a 1.4 full-time equivalent increase. I do want to highlight one of the issues that was discussed most extensively by our board. Included in this staffing increase is a 1.0 position for a arts coordinator for both performing arts and visual arts. Over the last few years, once this used to be a position that was taken away a few years ago, we've tried a piecemeal approach over the last few years. Our determination, after much discussion, was it has not been effective, so we are recommending a 1.0 administrator increase for that purpose. This is a level services budget, and importantly, it does align with our strategic plan. Wrong way. As I said, the $3.2 million increase is primarily driven by contractual salary obligations. Also in the services line, you'll see a $418,000 increase. That does include escalation for other contracts such as transportation. Importantly, on services, we have contracted with an outside firm, ECRA is the name of the firm, to help us manage our data and information, which is a critical element of our strategic plan. And you'll see at the bottom, again, with the level services budget, a 2.4% increase in personnel services. The total non-contractual delta is $300,000, if you will. Our staffing model is comprised of 3 elements. It is an enrollment-based model. At the elementary school, it follows our class size guidelines. Essentially, we take our elementary school enrollment and divide by 20 as a baseline. You'll see the class size guidelines for middle and high school. In addition to the enrollment-based model, we have program-based model, which includes such things as psychologists, social workers, guidance, library and media staff, nurses, instructional coaches, and the advanced learning program. Importantly, we do adjust for student need, which includes such items as special education, English language learners, and instructional support staff. Oh, I did it again, sorry. When you look at our staffing changes, budget to budget, you will see there's a lot of ins and outs there, but the net, as I said before, is a 1.4% increase. I will mention the arts coordinator again, a 1.0 full-time equivalent proposed. I want to point out here that the staffing here is based on a pre-evolve model. To be consistent, our 15-16 actual, once you take into the evolve model, which is essentially a swap for 4 paraprofessionals for 1 teacher, which has the net result of saving the town money on benefits, our actual staffing is about 1344. This is a bar chart that depicts our enrollment and staffing. The story here is largely that the enrollment is flat, and our staffing, again, follows our model, which is based on enrollment, program, and need. Moving to our capital improvement plan, our base maintenance for our $1.5 million of real estate in the schools is $9 million proposed for fiscal year 17. That is the color blue on the chart in the last column there. The green is just under $2 million for digital learning, and you can see this would be our second full year of full implementation. We had a very thoughtful, phased approach for this program. The red is largely the New Lebanon capital item, which First Selectman Tessie had referred to earlier. This is about a $32 million proposed expenditure. On our strategic plan, I just want to highlight that the board, the administration, and other stakeholders, including First Selectman Tessie and Chair Mike Mason, did participate last year in the development of a strategic plan. We are now moving into the next phase, which is implementation. We have 3 overarching goals: an academic goal to ensure each student achieves optimal growth within the core academic disciplines based on multiple variables, a personal goal, to ensure that each student develops the capacity to be responsible for their own physical and mental health, and an interpersonal goal to ensure that each student demonstrates growth in personal development and civic responsibility. These are the 3 overarching goals, and again, our budget aligns with these goals. Now I'm going to introduce School Superintendent Dr. McCursey. He'll address the next phase of work for the strategic plan, our students, and the paramount reason for this budget, which is student outcomes.
Thank you, Laura. Good evening. Good evening. I'm going to shift us into talking in some detail on the strategies. In the strategic plan, the overarching purpose is personalized learning. That's not new in Greenwich. It's an attempt by us working with the board and other community members and leaders, as Laura said, to try and really anchor all of our work in this very high-performing district in personalizing instruction and everything else for our students. At the core of that are 4 strategies. These strategies are led by cabinet members. We will on Wednesday with the BET Budget Committee talk in detail about each of these four to bring these to life. The budget supports and advances all of this work. Quite predominantly, the budget is working with current funds carried over to this work. Very little new money is sought for any of this work. So this is how core this work is. Strategic leadership and management, that's bringing a framework to all of our work in the strategic plan that is right now co-led by the board and the cabinet. We will begin to add back in members of the community and parents as we bring more cohesion to the strategic plan. In there, in that strategic leadership and management portion, is working on the leadership process, looking at our various committees and structures we have to see where we can streamline and make those more effective, more mission-driven in terms of personalized learning. It's also creating a dashboard for monitoring progress. We've had a dashboard before in Greenwich, before I got here. This is trying to create a state-of-the-art dashboard. It's also working, and we're intensifying this effort now, to be communicating both within the district, much more actively on the strategic plan, but also across the community. Standards, curriculum instruction, that really picks up the academic goal that Laura spoke to, that sense of academic growth and change over time. But that's work on curriculum development, aligned instruction, key assessments at the root of what we're trying to understand for students. Professional learning is also critical in this area. The third area, comprehensive social emotional learning and family and community engagement programs, known by the acronyms SEL or FACE. That's an attempt to speak to those other two goals that we've mapped out here. A lot of districts set an academic goal and end the story here. In Greenwich, we care very much, first and foremost, about academic outcomes. We have to care about our total student. One doesn't have to look far in high-performing districts now to see why it's so important we worry about the academic as well as the personal and interpersonal. So this strategic area speaks to the personal and interpersonal, our full sense of students. And then data information, systemic data information. We are a district, a town that's very thirsty for data information. This is an attempt to be very systematic about what we have to really look at outcomes in a very broad set of ways. We have tonight in the room a couple other board members who've signed Laura. Debbie Applebaum is here. Barbara O'Neill's here. We also have the full complement of the cabinet here. These are the people leading together the strategic plans. We have Ellen Flanagan, Irene Parisi, Jim Rickey, who's helped build this budget, Kim Eves, Bob Stacy, our HR director, Mary Ford, and then from the facility side, Ron Matten. So they're here tonight showing the collective strength around the strategic plan. Within the strategic plan, core to all of our work is the digital learning environment, or our work on the digital learning initiative. This has been very generously funded by the town. It was initially led by Ben Brannion, who's gone to another job in town, I'm told, but he very effectively led that charge. And it was no accident that our managing director of operations was asked to lead that, working in partnership with Irene Parisi. The plan was to be very modern, contemporary, and saying let's work cross-sector in what is a core promise, if you will, for us as a district and all of our students. It's the fourth year of implementation. This is the first year where it's fully in place across the district. We phase this very carefully with a multi-year plan reviewed repeatedly by the board, reviewed by external entities, and once a year reviewed very intensively by the BET and the RTM. This is the second year with one-to-one, meaning every student has a device. This is the first full year where every student has a device. Their Chromebooks up through fifth grade, up through the, start over. Their iPads up through the 5th grade and Chromebooks from the 6th grade up. And we're reviewing how well those devices are working. We've also worked intensively on upgrading the infrastructure. A few years back, accessing the internet in our schools was a spotty business. Now it is not that. Don't believe everything you read in the papers about what's happening in Greenwich High School. We've increased some 20-fold access there. We've zeroed in on the challenges. That's really students walking around with their own devices, not what's happening in the educational setting. But even there, we've brought in an external reviewer to look at the high school to say, how can we make sure internet access is full and complete? We've also done intensive professional learning with our staff. So far, we've managed to avoid many of the pitfalls that many other districts have faced as they've gone into this work. Indeed, in March, we're right now planning to bring into the district, at their request, all of the Southern Fairfield County superintendents and their curriculum director to come and spend several hours with us learning about how we're doing this, because they see our multi-year plan as particularly path-breaking, particularly comprehensive. Another cross-cutting effort is the achievement gap. a great wonder, a great marvel for Greenwich is the increasing diversity of our district. All across education, as you diversify, you get gaps in achievement. We have that in Greenwich. It's been a priority of the board for a long time to address that. We've increasingly taken our achievement gap work and blended that in to our core efforts. Personalized learning, in essence, and with digital devices as our first effort to go after personalized learning, is an attempt to narrow that achievement gap, bring a real focus on each individual into our work. We have very active partnerships with Teachers College, Columbia University through our achievement gap work, working with several of our elementary schools on writing, a core aspect of achievement, and also curriculum nights, that's featured there on the screen. That's the attempt to bring families and parents in quite actively into our schools to learn about the core academic requirements. And we also now, for the last 2 years, have been members of a national network of very high-performing districts that have the similar diversity as we do and similar achievement gaps. This year in particular, as we'll share on Wednesday with the Budget Committee, is a very active student group. This picture here, this circle made up of 5 parts, speaks to how we care about measuring success, measuring progress. You can see there we need to have a very robust data management system that has to tie to a data dashboard. Many in this room are quite familiar with data and dashboards. If you're not, simply put, that's what's a simple set of indicators that we can look at repeatedly to understand how we're doing. Behind that surface set of indicators or that dashboard, college, we had to have a conversation with the College Board because we were holding back participation in the AP. College Board didn't like that. Greenwich, they celebrate because we're pushing involvement in the AP, and we're still getting very high-level results. Next level of measures that matters is the SAT. Again, here you see we're well outperforming Durg B. Those are our comparative districts. We're way ahead of the state, and we're way ahead of the nation. So on this major measure that's very important to college admissions, we continue to perform very, very strongly. Now, the board is working actively with the administration on creating, I mentioned, the dashboard. In draft right now, not final, but in draft, we've created 5 key academic outcomes. One of those outcomes speaks to assess performance in the K through 2 level. I'm not showing you this picture. You have to imagine it. The next level speaks to smarter balanced performance, 3rd grade up through 8th grade. The next measure is the growth model, and then we leap to the AP as another measure. So already that's to give you an example of the balanced approach we're trying to take to outcomes. Beyond what you see in the tested outcomes, we care greatly about academically, just beyond testing, how are we doing? Many of you have heard about Olivia Halliday, and I heard that she went toe-to-toe with Stephen Colbert the other night. She's our junior who won the Google Science Fair Award. She's been touted nationally, internationally for her work on Ebola, and I understand that even Stephen Colbert couldn't get off her game the other night. This is how remarkable this junior is, this wonderful student who's one of Andy Bramante's students. We've had 18 Intel semifinalists over the last number of years, and Nick Szabo is the latest to make it to the semifinalist level. That is a bit like the Nobel laureate, and I'm not exaggerating here, because you go into Intel finalists and you see people who then went on to win the Nobel Prize in their particular areas of science. It's a major accomplishment that we've had done so well. In the math area, we continue to win the state championship 6 times out of the last 7 years. And we have a senior, Michael Carell, who's placed top internationally for his work in math. The arts remain a very major area for us, an incredible performance space built thanks to all of you in this room and some particular people, the Performing Arts Center. As I like to say, the students and staff earn that facility. If you look at music, both band, orchestra, and choral competitions, refereed, national competitions, we outperform most other districts. In theater, whenever we're eligible and there's a rolling eligibility, we win the national top prize there. And in art, we annually are pulling down major Connecticut awards. Athletics, we continue to dominate, some 85% winning average. Just last year, 4 state championships, 3 FCAC Coaches of the Year, 1 State Coach of the Year, and our athletic director, Gus Lundeen, was inducted in the FCAC Hall of Fame. When I stand here next year to give this, we already know of several other state championships. We already also know of several other coaches honored for their success. So I bring back Laura Erickson to bring us to a close.
Thank you, Dr. McCursey. Just in summary, our board is focused on a balance of academic, personal, and interpersonal goals for our students. The investment in digital learning is transformative for our district, and it is our progression to personalized learning. And we are using data to inform our instruction and to monitor progress as we strive to continuously improve educational outcomes. I would like to thank our board for their extensive review of our budget. We went through a rigorous process, 3 rounds of budget questions, several public hearings. I'd like to thank the cabinet members for their responsiveness, and I look forward to our session on Wednesday for our operating and capital review, which is just the beginning of the process, culminating with the RTM vote in May. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman Erickson and Superintendent McCursey. So we're going to move into the public hearing phase of this evening's events. Those of you who have not yet signed up but wish to speak, we would ask that you sign up over there. Okay. Thanks, Peter. All right, so we'll come now to the public hearing. We would ask that the speakers, when they're called, come forward, say your name for the record. This is being recorded, in case you hadn't noticed that already. And I would ask you to try to keep your remarks to 2 or 3 minutes. If it looks like people are having a hard time keeping to that target, then we'll start the stopwatch going, but we try not to do that. Keep in mind that I have quite a lot of these, and if everybody takes 3 minutes or more than 3 minutes, you're sort of being unfair to the other people who are here. So if you have more than a few minutes of material to say, we're happy to come back to you after we've heard everybody else who wants to be heard. So these are roughly in the sequence in which you signed up. And our first speaker this evening is Dawn Papalian, who's going to talk about the Greenwich Skate Park.
Good evening. My name is Dawn Papalian, and I want to thank you for allowing me to speak on behalf of the Greenwich Skate Park. The Greenwich Skate Park was a project of the Junior League of Greenwich to provide our youth with a safe and supervised facility. With the cooperation of the Department of Parks and Recreation, the Greenwich community came together to build the skate park to give the teens of our community The Greenwich community came together to build the skate park to give the teens of our community a place to practice their moves, socialize with their friends, develop their physical abilities, and enhance their self-expression without breaking the local no skating laws or damaging public or private property. In addition to benefiting the sanctity of the community, the inception of the skate park has also undoubtedly benefited the well-being of the teens that use it. Practicing each afternoon increases their confidence, their sociability, and ultimately their happiness. The feeling of achievement that accompanies the skate park is essential to these kids' growth, and it would be a disservice to them as well as to the community to deprive them of this. After a tremendous amount of dedication to the project, the Junior League of Greenwich, in collaboration with the Department of Parks and Recreation, achieved its goal of building the skate park in 2003. Today, this park stands as a testament to our acknowledgement and appreciation of this town's youth and our valuing them as an essential part of our community. Therefore, it goes without saying that we should afford the Greenwich youth the best possible future. Since the park opened in 2003, it has been a great success. Skating has become a mainstream recreational sport. The kids came to the park and they have kept coming, and that is why we are here tonight. The park is in great need of repair because of its constant use. It shows that the sport is extremely popular, and it's a testament to how greatly these kids rely on it. As the town of Greenwich, it is our duty to our youth to maintain and restore the park. Thank you.
Thank you. Katie DeLuca, Director of Planning and Zoning, to talk about GEMS and the fire station.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Katie DeLuca, and I am the Director of the Planning and Zoning Department. And I wanted to speak to you this evening about the important issue of the Northwest Fire Station and the GEMS facility in the context of the town's long-term plan. You, of course, have the difficult decision of weighing the costs and benefits associated with what residents require, what services they desire, and how the public employees who serve them are compensated. The town has been examining that question for the facility for a number of years now. Action has been taken. A property was purchased, plans were drawn, contracts have been signed, but still we are left with no permanent solution to a very serious problem. And although the wheels of government can sometimes turn uncomfortably slowly, I applaud you for thoroughly examining this issue. You've explored mutual aid from surrounding community for fire suppression services. You've explored and learned industry standards and insurance implications for those not covered in the coveted 4-minute response time service area. You've explored tapping into Greenwich's culture of civic engagement by filling the void with volunteers. And you've even explored the idea of starting from scratch and designing a new way to deploy these resources. So what is the right answer? What services are being provided? What is the cost of planning and preparing for a future that maintains our status as a premier residential community? A community that prioritizes public safety and ensures adequate life safety, incident stabilization, and property preservation for all, regardless of income or location. We have developed a mechanism to answer those very questions and documented the process in our town charter. It starts with the preparation of the Plan of Conservation and Development, which we have here, and ends with projects getting funded through the 15-year capital improvement program. So what does this plan say? Most pointedly is goal 4.31 that states, quote, funding for the new fire station on King Street should be provided, end quote. Goal 6.29 states, quote, study the delivery and management of fire services and facilities, end quote. But the other directives in the Plan of Conservation and Development that perhaps are more subtle as it relates to the GEMS and Northwest Fire Station is Chapter 4, which identifies what we are now and how we want to grow. The chapter describes that over centuries, several communities developed in Greenwich that persist to this day as village centers, in many cases with their own business district, post office, school, houses of worship, firehouse, and community center or park. Goal 4.26 clearly states that the citizens of the town, quote, want their neighborhood villages concepts reinforced, end quote. That means retaining these neighborhood schools, civic centers, and fire stations, all of which provide a sense of place and belonging. The planning process identified the problem, which is that we have a geographically disparate life safety standard that leaves inadequate coverage in some areas of town. An area of town that contains multiple high-risk exposures, including 2 large private schools, 3 senior care facilities, 3 churches, 2 large commercial office facilities, a busy neighboring airport, Audubon of Greenwich, 3 active country clubs, 2 of which are over 360 acres combined, and that's not including the town golf course, which could potentially become a significant number of additional residential homes, and dozens of large residential estates, many of which are on oversized parcels that could also create many more additional large residential homes. Now, it is unlikely that rapid redevelopment will happen in the area, but our current zoning regulations do allow for it. But regardless, the problem exists right now. We've asked the citizens of the town of Greenwich to express their opinions and to tell us what they want and to be engaged. They have done their part, and it is right here in writing for all of us to read. Again, I applaud the BET for asking the right questions, and the work and professionalism that has gone into getting you those answers is simply superior and very impressive. You gave the go-ahead to look for a more suitable piece of land last year and amended the governing agreement between the towns and GEMS to maintain a minimum of 4 strategically located ambulance stations. I hope the time has now come to move forward with a permanent solution to this very serious problem. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Katie. Kirk Schubert, President of the OGRCC, to talk about the Eastern Greenwich Civic Center.
Yes. Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. I have a lot to say here, so I'm going to mainly read off my comments. So my name is Kirk Schubert, and I'm President of the Board of Directors of the Old Greenwich Riverside Center. As such, I'm here to request that the Greenwich community have representation in the planning and the building of a new Eastern Greenwich Civic Center. This position is shared by the boards of the OGRCC, the Old Greenwich Association, and the Riverside Association. Given the importance a new civic center will have for our community for decades to come, it makes sense to our organizations that a committee that is planning such an important project should have broad membership and thoughtful input from the families in our community. The Civic Center project has particular practical importance for the OGRCC, as we've been a tenant there for over 2 decades. As many people know, the Civic Center is the heart of our organization, where we not only perform administrative functions essential to our programs and our mission, but also bring hundreds of our volunteers together for frequent board meetings, committee meetings, and program-specific organizational meetings. Within the building, we offer dance, performing arts, and a variety of other programs. We have many new program ideas which we feel will be beneficial to and well attended by our community in a new civic center. We have a good track record of both running long existing programs and starting new ones over the years. One example is our soccer program, which encompasses both recreation and travel divisions and has 1,200 participants. These programs range in age from 5 to 18. We run a very active adult program with scores of participants. The coaching director that we have for the older players is Kurt Putnam, the Greenwich High School varsity coach, and the coaching director for the younger players is Mickey Kaides, who runs Beachside Soccer Club, which is one of the premier soccer programs in the country. Kurt's been with us for 15 years, and Mickey's been with us for 20. Our highly successful baseball program has over 600 participants. 2 years ago, the OGRCC took over the management of Cal Ripken program, and through a great deal of volunteer effort, modernized the program and made it more robust. Our travel baseball program is enjoying its 10th anniversary this year. 5 years ago, we were approached to start a girls' basketball program, which now has over 225 girls. Our rugby program, which was also started by community volunteers, was started from scratch over 10 years ago and is one of the strongest in the country. Many of our players on the nationally ranked Greenwich High School team started in our program. The range of OGRCC programs extends to providing important child care in the community. At ISD, North Mianus, and Old Greenwich School, we serve over 140 children and their families through this program. We run Sandpiper's Day Camp during the summer and have done so for almost 5 decades. During the summer of 2015, we served over 464 campers and their families. Sandpipers also provides many summer jobs for local high school kids. Through rent and field use fees, we pay the town almost $110,000 per annum. We have over 1,500 family memberships in the OGRCC. And through these memberships, we have 5,400 registrants for our various programs. In 2015, we offered over $70,000 in scholarships to families in a variety of programs. To sum up, the OGRCC and the Old Greenwich Association and the Riverside Association stand together in asking for direct community participation in the planning for the prospective Civic Center, and the OGRCC would like to maintain our place within the new structure to continue offering successful programs as we have for the last 7 decades. Thank you.
Thank you. Ellen Williams from the Northwest Greenwich Association to talk about the new fire station and the GEMS facility. Evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Board. Welcome back, Mr. Chairman, to the Board.
Thank you.
I'm Alan Williams, President of the Northwest Greenwich Association, representing 650 homeowners in the northwest corridor of town. I've come before you several times in the past. I think this is my 5th year. I know that presidents in the past, I think it's now 13 years, we've been lobbying and trying to get a better fire protection in our part of the town. This feels like Groundhog Day to me. I seem to be doing this every year. I'm a couple of hours early, but Groundhog Day nonetheless. We have a problem with logistics, with getting fire apparatus and firefighters from point A to point B, and our biggest problem is time. We need to reduce the amount of time it takes to get firefighters to the scene to extinguish the fire and to effect a rescue if life is in jeopardy. I'm speaking in favor of a combined Northwest Greenwich Fire Station and GEMS facility. That makes the most sense, whether it's at the current facility that was bought during Jim's term, 2004, I believe, or some other place. We need it. We have to have it. I'm hearing instances from some homeowners where they're having a tough time getting fire insurance because we don't have a career crew there 24/7. We have Round Hill, and they're very good. They're not there all the time, and that's a problem whenever there's an ISO rating. We have one of the worst ISO ratings in town, and the town has made some nice changes to try and improve that with better education, cisterns, better fire apparatus, but still, we need to have the physical men, women, in a site that's closer to us. We have a lot of high target hazards. I won't go through the litany of things that the fire chiefs and the first selectmen have told you about in the years past. You're the most educated BET probably in many, many years about the operations on what happens at a fire ground and how long it takes to extinguish a fire. I'm in support of the extra 4 men or women that are being proposed in the first selectman's budget. I think they're needed. There's a safety factor for them as well as the residents. They can do more with a 4-man crew, 3-man crew, 2-man crew, not so much. You got to wait for backup, and that's a problem. Our response time is unacceptable, and it's unacceptable that we have so many institutions up there. We have 2 large education facilities where there's a lot of kids. We do a lot of things for the kids in this town, and maybe that's an angle that I'm going to try this time. If you won't do it for us old folks, you won't do it for the senior citizens facilities up there, do it for the hundreds of children that are there on a daily basis all year round, whether it's summer camps, at sports programs, in academics. They're there, and there's a lot of them, and we just can't have that kind of a hazard. The other thing that I'm a little worried about too, and another reason why we need the firehouse up in our area is that there is talk of potential expansion of Westchester Airport. We've been trying to get the 25-year master plan from Westchester County, and they've been a little elusive about presenting it to the public. I'm hearing things that kind of scare me about. They want to extend on both ends of the major runway 500 feet. What does that mean? Longer planes, and they're also trying to get rid of the passenger cap, which means more passengers more frequently. That's more air traffic through the Greenwich area, and they do cut through the Greenwich area, even though they're not supposed to. So in wrapping up, it's high time that you do this. Folks, you got to do this. You've got money in the budget for building this firehouse years down the road, getting the apparatus for it, but you've got to fund some firefighters now, get them ready so that when it's built, they can go in there and give us the kind of protection that we as taxpayers deserve, just like any other part of town. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrea Bloom? You have to correct me here,
Bloom.
to talk about the Pemberwick Park and the sidewalk.
My name is Andrea Bloom. I'm chair of the Pemberwick-Glenville Association. We're here today on behalf of the Pemberwick-Glenville community to support the capital budget line item labeled Park Sidewalk and Access Project. When complete, this project will correct serious safety hazards, neighborhood divisions, and barriers to access. These barriers have become even more apparent with the rapid growth in the community over the last century. The project will add enormous value to the community, residents, and the town. Our aim tonight is to encourage the BET to endorse this valuable project. We would also like to reinforce that there is a strong community support to proceed with the first phase of the project this budget cycle. This will create safe pedestrian, stroller, and wheelchair access into the playground. You can note some of the photos that we've included there. If you're not familiar with the park, the only access is up a flight of stairs. Last year, the public hearing on the CIP was postponed due to inclement weather. Although this project was not ready to include in the Selectmen's recommended budget, we noted an increased interest and support for the project. At that point, we secured a testimony and documentation of 400 residents expressing support for the project. The numbers have continued to grow as more families move to the area. Please recognize some of those who have come here tonight to validate that support. This project was deemed high priority in the town-wide Pedestrian Safety Advisory Committee report completed in 2009. Since last CIP, there has been a collaborative effort by town departments and community representatives to confirm objectives, collect preliminary data, and lay out the framework for this project. We believe there's no reason to delay this project any longer. We urge you to endorse it in your proposed budget to the RTM, who should also recognize the significant benefits that it will produce to our community. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Susan Foster to talk about turf fields at the middle schools. Okay. Eric Maurer to talk about the new Lebanon School. Evening.
Hi. Hi, I'm Eric Maurer from 101 South Water Street. Thank you for taking time to give public comment on so many important issues. I've spoken to you before about support of a feasibility study, a pre-feasibility study for New Lebanon. Now I'm speaking in support of moving forward with building a new Lebanon. I'm a parent of one student there and a parent of another student who could not go there because there's not room. My kindergartner takes a bus to Glenville. Even though the kindergarten is in a candy factory that was built in 1920, there was not room for my daughter to go to school there, so she takes a bus. Just want to ask us to move forward and not second guess all the hard work and all the studies that have gone into building a new school. About a year ago, the Board of Ed approved a first proposal to build in the woods, and we spent the past years second guessing that. There's a lot of people in the community who believe that the hill's a great place to build a school. A lot of people have fond memories about that. I understand that. But building on the hill does not work. It's very simple. The school needs to be next to the field. The students of Byram are the only students in town who play on blacktop and wood chips, while everyone else, all the other children in town run on grass. You need to have school next to the field so that they can take advantage of it. Right now, they use the field one day a year on field day. I've heard that, there's interest in second-guessing the idea of renovation. That was a first option of more than 8 options that have been explored. When that was explored, there's very little savings in renovation. The gym is not big enough to have a regulation basketball game. The cafeteria is not big enough to feed the students. My son would have lunch at 10:30 because they have so many shifts to get the students in there. So there's very little worth saving in that school except for fond memories of days gone by. So I also want to speak in support of the line item budget for modular units for the school. The current proposal that's before you for the school allows you to build the school next to it while having students stay in the existing school, and then once a new school's built, you can move the students over there. As an architect, that appeals to me very much. It's very rational. It's the way it's done almost everywhere. I'm now a member of the RTM, and I've heard a lot of varying opinions about this. Some people think it's a great learning opportunity for the students to watch the construction of a school. I think that'd be fantastic. Other people are concerned about the safety of their children being next to a construction site. But for me, the reason to move forward with modulars is the same reason to move forward with the school. The school is too small. If even for 1 year we can build modulars and restore kindergarten under the same roof and restore pre-K, that would be the best thing we can do to reduce the achievement gap. Restoring pre-K is extremely important to improving the performance of the school, and if we could do that now with modulars, that would really just be the first step towards improving the performance of New Lebanon moving forward and be getting students ready to improve when the school's built. So thank you very much for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Diego Sanchez to talk about the New Lebanon School. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Diego Sanchez. I'm the current co-president of New Lebanon PTA. I'm here in support of the Board of Education budget, especially for the New Lebanon School, New Lebanon School, and the modulars for next year. As one of the parents already mentioned, we are past overdue for a new school. The kids have been taking classes in closets. We're talking about the achievement gap. How are you going to achieve something when you don't have the proper place to study? So I think it's time now for everybody to move forward and just approve this budget. We, the parents, would like to go and do something else for the school with the kids instead of coming and talking to every single entity in this town to approve something that is past due. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Richard Alves, a lieutenant in the fire department, to talk about fire department staffing. Good evening.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Rich Alves. I come to you tonight as the Vice President of Local 1042, representing the career firefighters in town. I would just like to make two quick comments. One, we are in agreement with the First Selectman's recommended budget in reference to the firefighter staffing and Station 9, which is the Northwest Corridor Station. And number two, that we hope that you forward this budget as proposed to the RTM for full approval, and that we'd like to see it come to fruition. Thanks.
Thank you. Which station are you in, Lieutenant? Yeah. Thank you. Claire Kilgallen to talk about New Lebanon School.
Good evening, Chairman, members of the board. Thank you for giving us a moment to speak. I appreciate the comments by Eric and Diego, so I won't repeat that. But for everyone's benefit in the room who may not appreciate all the issues not being as close to it as I am or others might be, I'm speaking in support of the school's capital budget on New Lebanon School. For over a dozen years, instruction's been taking place in non-classroom space, hallways, lobbies, closets. We don't have our pre-K, we don't have our kindergarten, and so that's why the modulars are essential if that's the way it goes forward. It's almost like ripping the Band-Aid off. We don't know what the projection is going to be for the next school year, but this school year we had a situation where we were over by at least a dozen students in kindergarten who were offered to go to Glenville or see if there was space at other schools. Luckily for us, a number of the parents did take those options, and just so everybody knows, that's not just something that was specifically suggested by the Board of Ed, given the situation. But there has been a quiet system going on in the New Lebanon community for years because of the space situations in the school. Parents have opted their children out of the school because of the space constraints. So there are numbers of parents who have either gone to private school or taken advantage of the magnet program to take their students out of a crushed situation. The modulars would keep the students together. The worst thing that could happen to our students is for them to be dispersed to multiple schools. Separate and apart from the IB program, which I'll touch on in a moment, you don't have a community. The community would be decimated. And to rebuild that takes years. That happened in Glenville. It took them years to put it back together. We have our own challenges that would make it even worse. With respect to the IB program, thousands of dollars, I don't know the exact number, have been invested in the International Baccalaureate program. And we are up for our reauthorization while we're going to be in construction. It is a transdisciplinary collaborative program, and to have students in 3 different locations administered by 3 different sets of administrators. The students would not be in school X being with those other students. They would be taught by their teachers, but the collaborative nature would be lost. All those kinds of things would be lost, and it puts the IB certification in jeopardy, which in turn puts the magnet in jeopardy, which in turn puts the racial balance in jeopardy. So please support the modulars if that's the way it goes. Thank you.
And you're on the building committee for this. You're on the building committee, right?
I'm on the building committee. I'm on the PTA. I was on the feasibility study. And I have 3 boys in the school right now.
What are you doing with all your spare time?
She's a lawyer.
Reading town contracts.
Great. Irv Porter to talk about the capital budget and the RTM liaison program.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Porter.
Welcome back.
Thank you. You too.
I'll be brief. For the benefit of the group, there is a liaison responsibility with the RTM to make sure that its membership is as well informed as it can be about the budget, in as much as the RTM has a responsibility to either approve or reduce budgets items basically on a line-by-line basis. That's as prescribed by the charter. The RTM has no authority to increase budgets, and therefore the amount of time and effort that the RTM spends is basically in proportion to the degree of dedication that you have with RTM members. Capital projects relative to the budget are put forward by town departments. They're vetted by the BET, particularly your group. And if they are deemed to be worthy, they're included in the town and the school budget. Those then in turn are merged together and presented as they were tonight. Obviously, when it comes to budget items, there's limited funding, and the guidelines that your group puts forward are the overall guidelines under which both the first selectman and the town schools superintendent really have to operate. We've complained, maybe erroneously, from time to time, we being people that are responsible for acting as liaison to the RTM, we've complained from time to time that we don't have enough involvement. What you come to understand, though, is that this is a very, very rigorous process that's fully vetted, sometimes maybe over-vetted, and the only way that the RTM can function is through its standing committees, or if there is someone here as a homeowner and as a taxpayer who has a specific concern, they've got to step up at a public meeting like this, or they can call one of their RTM members and vet with them what their interests are and why. This year, we took a little different approach in concert with what Mr. Tessie and Mr. Branyan thought was appropriate, and they included us in what I'll call the vetting process. which may not be a perfect process, but it's the only process that we have, and we can thank you for that, okay? We looked at 25 discretionary items. In other words, these were items that came into the budget for the first time. Out of those, we really could only concentrate on 3 or 4 that were major items. And we focused on those that were being put forward because they would likely improve productivity, information technology being noteworthy. And when it came to safety, obviously the First Selectman's primary responsibility is the safety of its citizens. Quality of life issues, an example being the Eastern Greenwich Civic Center, certainly have to be considered. But bottom line out of all of that, there's a limitation to the amount of effort that we can put in. We also this year, on an informal basis, with people from the Finance Committee, the Public Works Committee, as well as the Budget Overview Committee, went back and looked at 12 items that were passed previously and are along the road toward completion. One in particular that we picked on was Holly Hill, because they're clearly, and I visited today, and Don visited on Saturday, there are parts of the Holly Hill project that clearly should have been moved forward long before now. They've been basically in a funk for 2 years. But there are environmental as well as health and safety issues, and we would urge that, although I haven't seen the final cut, that you seriously consider that project or that tranche of projects that are appropriate in order to improve what is not a healthy situation. We looked at King Street, we looked at GEMS, we looked at Eastern Greenwich Civic Center, we considered the streetscape for Greenwich Avenue. All of these, I can't say were done with the same degree of attention that the BET had, but I feel confident on a personal basis that I know more about the budget than I've ever known. And therefore, I applaud you that are living with the budget on a day-to-day basis. Someone prophesized that if you're on the RTM, you've got a few people that are serious about this. On the other hand, if you're working on a budget and you're a member of one of the town departments, you add them all up and it's like 800 or 900 people working, where basically you may have just a handful of people working on behalf of the BET. So this being the first public hearing, I would encourage people here, if they have questions that aren't answered tonight, that they go back to their RTM representative, that they appear at subsequent public hearings, and they stay tuned. Thank you.
Thank you, Irv. Susan Foster, talk about the turf field at the middle
Hello,
school.
good evening. My name's Susan Foster, and I live in Riverside. My home abuts the Eastern Middle School fields, and I've lived there since 1990. I'm here tonight to speak about the proposed monies for the study of installing artificial turf at the 3 middle schools. Eastern Middle School and Riverside School are the de facto parks for the neighborhood of Riverside. We have no parks in Riverside, and the only open space are at Riverside and Eastern. And Riverside, frankly, is pretty much paved over or has playground equipment on it. So that's really not an open green space. Eastern is the open green space. And having lived there since 1990, I'm very familiar with how much this open space gets used by the neighborhood. We have dog walkers, we have casual recreational play such as Frisbees, we have the kids testing their rockets, you name it, everything is going on out there, and it's a very beloved area for the neighborhood. Grass fields are the gold standard for field sports. That's what you really want children and adults playing on if you can have them. They're the safest, and they don't overheat, and you don't get as injured on them. The Eastern Middle School field is an excellent grass field. According to my son, who was a soccer player here for many years, he thinks it's the best field in Greenwich. It's not really a candidate for turf, in my opinion, and The issue at Eastern is one of basically of overuse, and the overuse is not, frankly, happening during the school year. It's happening when the school is closed over the summer. And the way that you protect a grass field is that it needs to be rested, and so the issue at Eastern Middle School is the field gets overused primarily late spring, summer, and by the time fall opens, school opens up, the field has been overused and wasn't properly rested. I think what needs to happen is a town-wide survey. I know this was done years ago when I was on the high school athletic council. There was a town-wide survey that was done to identify field space in the town. I think it needs to happen again. Where can new fields be built? We need them. Pomerantz, I think, would be an ideal spot. There is an area inside of Pomerantz that would be absolutely perfect for grass fields. I think the town needs to also look at compromised fields that are having serious drainage issues. And the one that is on my side of town that really needs that attention is Eastern Civic Center. That is where I think the money should go, because those are fields that do get used all the time and have a very, very serious drainage issue. So I think that would be a good place to consider. Turf is appropriate. That would be one to look at first before Eastern Middle School. Turf fields, I don't know if everyone knows it here, are extremely expensive to build. They're at least $1 billion, and they're not maintenance-free, although that's what people think. They are not maintenance-free fields. They have to be fenced because they're vulnerable. They're particularly vulnerable to food, gum, and sugary beverages like Gatorade. So you have to protect them. They have to be fenced. Eastern Middle School is already fenced all the way around the perimeter. So if you put the turf field in, you're going to have to put a second fence inside of this other fence to protect the turf field, which would not look very nice being our only open space in all of Riverside. Also, obviously, dogs are not allowed on turf fields. They would cause some serious damage. Today, in today's Greenwich Times, you may have seen that there was an article about Senator Blumenthal's proposal for a federal review of the safety of turf fields. So I just bring that to your attention in case you missed it. In light of all of the above, I ask that these funds being considered to study the middle schools for turf field be partially redirected, and the portion that would go towards Eastern go towards the Eastern Civic Center fields. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to be heard this evening? Yeah, I see a hand. Sure. See, you got in front of the list here.
Good evening. I would have brought my note forward here, but I'm Peter Quigley. I spoke last week at the Selectmen's CIP session. I know most of you, Mr. Lash, I've just met, and Ms. Kiernan, I don't know, but thank you for the opportunity to talk about what I discussed briefly last week. You do fine work, a lot of work. It's very difficult to make a choice between where to make capital investments in this town. But I'm going to direct your attention again to capital investments and the fact that the storm drain systems in this town have not really been attended to for probably 50 years and maybe 100 years. They are in significant repair mode. And I've come before this BET several times over the last probably 6 or 7 years, often following my colleague, Mr. Porter, who zeroed in on some of these infrastructure problems. Truly infrastructure. Storm drain systems are not your sanitary sewers. They are clearly where we build our buildings on top of the soil. But very few people are supportive of underground things because you can't see it, you don't know it. But when it rains in this town, because of the development going on, a half-inch of rain does a lot of damage in flooding the beaches down in the coastal areas. I'm sorry, I'm just a citizen and honestly a student of Mr. Porter's here, who I've been working with probably for the last 8 years. I'm going to zero in, and I asked the question last week, I see Ms. Siebert in the room as well, are you putting enough money into the CDM study that was put together back in 2011 that indicated a $200 million estimate of repairing or building out an adequate storm drain system. This does not include project number 65. Project number 65 is the Byram River watershed, which could be another $30 million on top of this. This CDM study that I think, at least from a summary standpoint, you have, and clearly Public Works is the expert here, but when you take a look at about 6 or 7 of these projects, and you look at Holly Hill, as Holly Hill is an epicenter, and you have between the Horseneck watershed and water flow and Tom's River, I get river mixed up, Tom's Brook, that interact with each other, by the way, and then head right down to Holly Hill, you have about $35 million of estimates here of storm drain systems in this area that need to be taken care of. So to go to Mr. Porter's point, the town has several other areas where these watersheds flow. His area in Old Greenwich clearly is another very important area. So I would ask you to take a real good look, a real good hard look at how to plan out over the next 10 or 15 years a long-range planning schedule for funding, because it's not bad if you're planning over 15 or 20 years. $200 million is only $10 million a year. Interestingly, the fund to invest in sewers is about the same to invest in storm drains, but they're separate systems, so you have to deal with both of them in a separate way. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Alan Small to talk about the Northwest Firehouse and the firefighter staffing proposal.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I spoke at the capital improvement process about the advocating for the firehouse. I appreciate you putting that, the first selectman putting that in the budget for this year. What I would like to address a little bit more is the firefighter situation, because I've been involved in town government for a little while now. It wasn't until last year that I was aware that 3 of the firehouses in Greenwich only have 2 firemen in there. And if they go to your house and there's a fire there, they have to wait for more to show up until there are 4 to go in. So you may not know about it until it's a fire at your house and the firefighters show up and are waiting outside without going in. I think that's a life safety issue for this town that is very, very serious, and that this is the first step, what the first selectman has proposed, of bringing up the firefighting staff to not only staff the Northwest Greenwich Northwest Firehouse, but also Byram, Old Greenwich, and Cost Cobb, so that we can have equalized fighting force across the town and not rely on dual response. To me, dual response is a misnomer. And what it means is this town is relying on 2 fire trucks to get to a fire at essentially the same time. And we can go into all the statistics on the dispatch and when they arrive, but I use another example, just myself. When I go to meet someone at Starbucks, the odds of them arriving within a minute of me are very, very slim. And yet the firefighters tell me that every minute that elapses when those firefighters can't go in, that the fire will double in size in that house. So I think this is a very serious issue. Rather than debate the number of employees, if we have employees in town that are retiring, I think that it's up to this board to determine how best to reallocate those employment slots to firefighters or public safety issues first, so that you can adequately protect this town. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Alan. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Don Hamilton.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Lash. Committee, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to tell you that we take our work at the Public Works Committee much more seriously than probably most people know, and I wanted to reinforce the capital project at Holly Hill, which is extraordinarily important because it not only is a source of potential runoff issues at the dump at the site itself, but it's the intersection of a major storm drain and a major sewage drain, serving hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of families back to Post Road and beyond. The sewer system is quite old. It's a concrete system. Much of it is buried, some 30 feet below the surface in some places. And the sewer system and the storm drain either run under or adjacent to Tom's Brook at the most critical juncture, which is a low point at Holly Hill. So the committee believes, and I certainly believe, that this is a critical project. The town should be paying a lot more attention to areas where our sanitary septic system and our storm system overact or could be damaged by excessive flooding, by excessive water, which is exactly what happens. We don't have a combined a storm sewer system, thank God, but we've got intrusion, and it's very damaging to our waste treatment plant. It's damaging to size it. We get intrusion both ways, I'm certain, and Holly Hill is an excellent project. It accomplishes it's a brilliant, really, combination of attacking a storm drainage problem and a septic problem. Undersized, overaged, risk of failure. If something happens at Holly Hill, we've got a big problem. And that's a great area to attack. This town's ready, and I applaud the Public Works Department and the town for moving it up on the list. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And I would encourage you and your committee, if you have anything you want to submit in writing to the Budget Committee in the next couple of weeks, to do so. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Oh.
Oh, yes. He always comes out at the end.
He hides in that closet back there.
Ladies and gentlemen, they keep trying to put me away in there, but I can't stay in there forever.
In case there's anyone who doesn't realize, he's running the recording equipment.
I'm here just briefly to tell you again, please, everyone's talking about safety tonight. The back roads of this town are probably the most dangerous roads around. They're up and down, they curve, they go all over the place. They're even banked the wrong way in some cases. The paint that the Public Works Department has been using on the center lines and the white lines on the outside are not reflective. Not anymore. They're gone. It's wasted. It's the sun has bleached it out or something's happened to it. There are many, many towns in the Midwest and Northeast, much smaller than us, less budget than us, and they have markers, simple little markers, mostly on their curves. They don't cost a lot, and in fact, I sent away for a catalog, and I'll give it to you as soon as it comes, so you'll know. We're talking about a couple of bucks a piece, and that's it. And if this town can't afford to put 5 or 6 up where there's curves just to save a life, then I wonder. So please, I know it's not in the budget, but let's think about it, okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for...
And one other thing, I want to commend the fire department about something. I had a fire in my house this summer. I happened to be home one night about it, and I woke up 1 o'clock. When I called, within, I'd say 4 minutes, 5 minutes, there were 5 trucks outside my house. Now, I'm over here in Coscob off of Indian Field. If there's a house in the back country, I don't know how you're going to get 4 or 5 trucks in 4 or 5 minutes to their houses. So let's talk about that firehouse too. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Trees.
Place to end, right?
Certainly. Thank you. Joanne Messina.
Good evening. Joanne Messina, speaking as Executive Director of the Greenwich Tree Conservancy. Here to speak of a couple of things. The Tree Conservancy started 9 years ago. We have a partnership with the town. We've planted in excess of 2,400 trees on public lands in Greenwich with the town over the last 9 years. In that same time, we've lost in excess of 3,000 trees in town. And specifically, tonight, speaking to the Board of Education, we lost several hundred trees because of the MISA project, and they were to be replanted on school grounds in town, and that hasn't happened yet. Now, obviously with the New Lebanon School, and may I say that the Tree Conservancy members and boards all support both the MISA project and the New Lebanon New School, but again, we may be losing another 100 trees with the rebuilding of the New Lebanon School, and specifically, the Tree Conservancy has tried to plant in the western part of town because we have less tree canopy there, and the benefits of the trees are not seen as much in the western part of town, so we're very concerned about losing more trees, both in the central and the western parts of town. We have had a proposal in through DPW and parking services and I believe Parks and Rec to start greening our parking lots in town. It was presented in the CIP 3 years ago. It was put out a year or two. It was again last year put out, and I believe this year it may not be in the first selectman's budget. But I think it's a way that we might be able to balance the loss of these trees in the central and western part of town by starting to green our parking lots in town that have no, in some cases, no trees at all, and in other cases, just trees that aren't given the benefits. If you have a little scraggly tree, it's not giving the benefits that a large deciduous tree can give. So I would just like you to make note of that, and hopefully in some way we can replant and incorporate our natural resource. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes. Evening.
Good evening, Chairman and members of the board. My name is James Pluniak, and I'm the Chairman of the First Selectmen's Youth Commission. Today, I stand before you to ask you to consider accepting the state funds, helping us to have a town where youth and adults work together, and to continue to grow such programs as the Youth Commission and the Juvenile Review Board. To provide a little bit of background, I've worked with Mrs. Bixby for the last 3 years on the Youth Commission. And I can definitely say that between Mrs. Bixby and Mr. Peter Tessie, they work excellently together and are able to address all matters that concern youth. A little bit of extra background, thank you to the Greenwich United Way. They identified the need for a youth services point person back in 2005 with their community needs assessment. This first sparked the Juvenile Review Board, and we've been able to develop the First Selectmen's Youth Commission and resurrect the Safe Rides program last year, and working on countless other initiatives this year. Therefore, I just ask you to quickly support the funding that the state is offering to create a youth services point person within the town. And thank you and good evening.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Well, the Budget Committee begins its formal work with the departments on Wednesday morning at 9. Those are meetings that you're free to attend. They're not public hearings, but they're public meetings. And sometimes they're in this room over the next 3 weeks, and sometimes they're upstairs in the Cone Room. And of course, as I indicated to one of the speakers earlier, if there's anything you want to communicate to us in writing, I would encourage you to do that. And you can send it to Mr. Minarski, the controller, or to Roland Geiger, the budget director, and they'll make sure that we see it. And with that, thank you very much for coming. Safe trip.